Nice to meet you all. I'm Greg Nelson with the White House Office of Public Engagement. I work on energy and environment issues, and through that I've had the chance to meet many of you. I'm very excited to see you all here today. Welcome to the White House, and thanks for making your way through our security lines. We appreciate the effort it took to get here. There'll be some folks still trickling in as they get through security, so please show your patience for those folks as they come in and take a seat in the chairs. We've got a great program today. We're excited to hear from you and get the chance to learn a little bit about the work that your organizations and your companies have been doing in this area. And I think we've got a great program of speakers from the White House coming to talk about some of the great work that the White House and the administration is doing in this area as well. So to lead us off, I want to introduce my boss, Ms. Valerie Jarrett, the Senior Advisor to the President.
Thank you, Greg, and good morning, everybody. We are just delighted to have you back here. I know many of you in this room have been working tirelessly with us on both energy and climate change and our legislative agenda, and we just appreciate that ongoing relationship. I want to welcome you to our new space. It's our first event that we've had in this new space over in the EEOB, so we're proud to be able to have a new facility to work with you. And I just want to thank you guys for all of your hard work. There is a hard road ahead, and we have a lot of important work to do, and we simply can't do it without you and your support and your guidance and your counsel and your energy, no pun intended, devoted to this very important cause. You are the ones that are out there on the front end every day with your entrepreneurial spirit, your emphasis on innovation, your focus on opportunities for tomorrow, and it's with you that we're going to move our country forward in a positive direction. And the point person in the White House, we are so fortunate to have dedicated to this initiative, is none other than Carol Bronner, who I know you all know and have worked with closely. And so with that, I'd like to turn it over to Carol, please.
Thank you, Valerie, for that introduction, and let me just also thank Valerie and her staff for all they do to engage the business community, engage the nonprofits. It makes a real difference when we're able to work with you all and to learn from you all. I do know many of you, and those I don't know, it is nice to get to meet you. I want to start by thanking all of you for the incredible leadership you are providing on a absolutely essential issue for this administration, for this president, and ultimately for our country. As you know, the president has said from day one that we need a different energy future. We need an energy future that is about breaking our dependence on foreign oil, an energy future that creates clean energy jobs here in the United States, and that we need to put a cap on the dangerous pollutants that contribute to global warming. We have been about doing everything we can to make that a reality. The first thing we did, as you're well aware of, when we came to office after the president's election, was to work with many of you to craft the energy portions of the Recovery Act, or stimulus, as we frequently refer to it. And I think the fact that we were successful in securing so many dollars for new technologies, loan guarantees, weatherizations, efficiencies, batteries, is an indication of the level of interest in our United States Congress for a different energy future. You may remember after the bill passed and after the president signed it, it was referred to by, I think it was the New York Times, as the biggest energy bill ever in the history of this country, and I think that is probably true. Secretary Chu and his team, Matt Rogers, have been hard at work moving the money out across the country, and I think we're starting to see some of the impacts of those dollars. We're starting to see businesses rehiring because of the Recovery Act. Now, obviously, we have a long way to go when it comes to the economy, and Larry Summers and others are hard at work, and Tim Geithner, but I think we can be encouraged that there is a growing demand for clean energy in this country. In terms of the legislative agenda, which is now where we have turned our focus in terms of comprehensive energy legislation, as you know, the bill has passed out of the House. I think there were many folks who said in March, who said in April, it's not going to happen. I think there were folks who said on the day of the vote, it's not going to happen. But there was bipartisan support for this bill, and it has, obviously come through the House, and now we have turned our sights on the Senate. The Senate, like every issue, is a slightly different entity when it comes to the legislative process than the House. Very, very different rules, not the least of which, rather than a simple majority, we will need 60 votes to pass the bill, to invoke cloture so we can go to debate on the bill. And I think that it is not something, it's not impossible. 60 is never easy, but it's not impossible. We're encouraged by several things that are happening right now on the Hill, and some of them you may already be aware of. First of all, Bingaman was able to pass the renewable energy standard, the nuclear loan guarantee portion of the comprehensive package out of his committee with bipartisan support. I think that's extremely important. Last week, Kerry and Boxer introduced the climate portion of the bill and are moving towards hearings in the not too distant future, and will look to bring the bill out of that committee. Other committees of jurisdiction include Mr. Rockefeller, the Ag Committee, the Finance Committee, and Foreign Affairs, and in varying degrees they are all doing their work right now. Obviously, the Finance Committee is a little bit slower than the others because their time has been taken up with health care. But we do continue to believe that this can happen. The schedule is something that's a little bit beyond our control. Obviously, the Senate has taken more time on health care than was originally anticipated, but they're quite capable of doing more than one thing. Once the individual committees have completed their work, what Harry Reid has told us, and he's told many people, is that he will then look to craft what's called a leadership bill. And that's not just the sum of the parts. It's not that he just adds up what everyone has done and turns it into one bill. He'll actually be looking to make sure that this leadership package has bipartisan support. And so we've been doing work with a number of Republicans who are interested in comprehensive energy reform. A number of them have particular things they'd like to see in the bill. I think they're things that many of us would agree with. And so in the coming weeks and month, I think we will start to see emerge what the consensus package could look like, what the outlines of it will look like. From our perspective, obviously, a strong renewable electricity standard is important. We believe, obviously, there needs to be a cap. There needs to be an economy-wide cap. There needs to be a robust trading regime. We need to make sure that nuclear is part of our future. We think it is an important part of our clean energy future. We need to make sure that consumers are protected, that there are mechanisms where the allowances, the revenues generated from the sale of the allowances can be rebated to consumers, and that our trade-sensitive, energy-intensive industries get the kind of support they need as we move through a transition. Whether or not this can be completely done by the time we go to Copenhagen for the international discussions, I think is an open question. We're certainly going to do everything we can to be as far down the path as possible. And I think that Harry Reid is interested in making sure we are as far down the path as possible. I think the final thing, let me just say, and I know they wanted me to take some questions from you all, is that we wouldn't be where we are in this debate but for your engagement. And we're not, as federal employees, as White House employees, allowed to encourage you or ask you to go lobby your members of Congress. But obviously you make your own decisions in terms of what you do. But the degree to which the American people hear your voices, hear from the business community why this is important to them, what's in it for them, makes it that much easier for us when we're up on the Hill talking to members. And I know that's what you're doing, and we can't thank you enough for all of the leadership that you are providing on this very, very important issue. And I am happy to answer any questions. Yes. I don't know if you need a mic, or I'll just assume not. Go ahead. But if you don't mind introducing yourself.
No, David Weinstein with the I-2A Fund in Chicago. I just think it's important that you have vignettes as part of your plan. And last week we completed an investment in this company, Socor, which is a solar energy company. That investment would not have been made had you not been smart as you did and converted to a cash grant.
Yep.
So I just think it's important that you have vignettes and that we provide those for you, because we originally said no to the deal, but then when you changed your policy, we changed and private dollars flowed, and I think that's just an important story for what this administration is doing, so
Great.
I'm happy to share that story with you, and hopefully the company will do very well. And I hope that there's more stories that can be shared with the administration like that, showing how the policies that you put in place have really led to significant economic impact.
Well, there are $1 billion worth of those stories, right? We've already done a bill. But thank you very much, because vignettes are really, really important to us. And if you guys have stories that we can use, it's incredibly helpful. And if you can share them with Greg Nelson, who's going to stand up, that would be, the president likes to use them, the vice president. We all like to tell the story of what's happening out there. And when we were, and I see John Doran in the front row here, he was very helpful to us when we were putting together the Recovery Act provisions, and really helped us understand this whole issue about the cash grants. And as you might imagine, when we first suggested it to people on the Hill, it was not all that well received, but we hung in there and we worked at it, and some of you helped us work at it, and it's turned out to be hugely successful. And we've had I think last week, or maybe it was the week before, Secretary Geithner and Secretary Chu announced the fact that we had hit the $1 billion mark, and we get to keep going. I mean, it's one of the few things in the Recovery Act that's not actually capped. As long as people are there and qualifying, the money will continue to flow, and so we're very excited about that program. Other questions or comments? Mm-hmm.
Steve Glenn, Living Homes. So how important is carbon credit, and how for carbon credit legislation for Copenhagen, and how visible will the president be in trying to get that passed, either before or after Copenhagen?
Well, we've already been, the president's already been very, very visible in the House vote, for example. I think we had, I don't know how many members up here for personal meetings. First, we brought the entire committee, Democratic members of the committee, up here for a meeting. Then we brought members in individually for meetings. So we both worked hard to get it out of the committee and then to get it off the floor. And actually the timing worked out quite well, because we do an annual congressional picnic, and that was the night before the vote. So members that who might have wanted to avoid us didn't have the opportunity. We were able to bring them in and talk to them. So the president has already engaged and is fully committed to engaging in the Senate. Obviously right now people's time is taken up with health care, so what we've been doing is all of the work with the individual committees to keep the process moving. But the president, this is one of his top 3 priorities, and nothing is going to change in that. We will manage in Copenhagen wherever we are in the process. We have the House, we'll be moving forward, if not done, in the Senate, and we'll be able to manage that. And I am very encouraged by what is possible in Copenhagen. I was with the president 2 weeks ago at the UN General Assembly, where he spoke on climate change. We had a number of bilateral meetings, including with the Chinese, which gave me a lot of encouragement that these kind of meetings 10 years ago were of a very, very different nature. I mean, obviously China is making huge commitments, huge investments in renewables. That's obviously good for the Chinese. We need to be doing the same here. We need to make sure that we're competitive in that market, that we're creating U.S. jobs, and that we're ultimately, leading the exports of clean energy technologies. And I think we can do that, and I think we're making a turn towards that. What I hear from you all is you need the certainty and the predictability to make those kind of investments, and that's what comprehensive legislation is going to give you. Now, every now and then we hear from people saying, well, let's just do the renewable electricity standard. Let's not do the other parts of the bill. Let's not worry about putting a cap on greenhouse gas pollution. We can do that later. We think that would be a big mistake. We think you have to keep these programs coordinated, because they do impact with each other. We also realize that states are starting to put caps on greenhouse gas. EPA has some authorities that it's going to start to use, and all of that is good, but I think we would all agree that a comprehensive national program is what's really going to give us the playing field that will allow for the investments, that will create the jobs, and allow us to compete in the global market for clean energy. In the back.
Good morning. My name is Joe James. I'm with a company called Agritech, and we convert cellulosic material into a coal replacement. We've had a lot of interest from India and from China, but we're nervous about sharing our technology there due to the potential loss of our IP. As you're having those one-on-one discussions with those countries, is there some way that you can protect small companies like ours so we don't have to run the risk of having knockoffs produced in some of those countries?
Well, that is thank you for asking the question and for reminding us that we need to be mindful of that. Obviously, and those of you and many of you do business in China, understand that the tech transfer issues are complicated. They are important, and how they're managed is always fairly complicated. But I think the point you're making is one we need to be mindful of, which is as we look at what kind of bilateral, bigger, broader relationships we can have with China. The president will be traveling to China next month, and so we will be looking at that bilateral relationship. We need to be mindful of the small businesses here in this country, and both the opportunities in China, but how we make sure that you preserve what is important to you and what's valuable to your company.
Bill Keith, Sunrise Solar from Indiana. I created a solar-powered attic fan in my garage and did it 10 years ago. Bill Keith from, can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
All right.
See, do you know that this is the first time anyone's used this new facility? And if you've been in the old facility, you couldn't hear in the old facility. So apparently one of the things they fixed was the acoustics.
So I created this solar-powered attic fan in my garage, and I did it 10 years ago when the green people, if you will, the clean energy people, were Birkenstock-wearing, tie-dyed shirt people.
Granola eating
people. And I come out of a conservative home, and I just thought it was a good idea. Now I've gotten, and there were no programs whatsoever to help me, not on the state or federal level. I did it out of sheer will and determination that I was going to make this thing happen. Now the tidal wave has totally crested over my head. There's still nothing available for small business. In fact, we couldn't even ramp up in the 2-week time period we had for the $30 million federal research and development grant. And I had some pretty good people on my team trying to make us meet that deadline. I asked Secretary Salazar about this last night, and his response was, I think the SBA has some programs. Well, I had lunch with the SBA yesterday, and they don't have any programs. So what could you say to encourage more small businesses that are garage inventors, where I've added jobs, manufacturing jobs in the state of Indiana, and I think that's why I'm here today, is because we are a success story. So how do you foster more success stories like mine when it doesn't trickle down to my level?
So can you help me understand why you think the SBA doesn't have programs?
Because I went to the SBA, the SBDC, the Department of Commerce. I called Senator Lugar's office, Senator Bay's office, Congressman Visklowski's office. And the closest thing that they could get for me is they said, are you making your product in a rural area? And I said, well, I'm 35 minutes from downtown Chicago. There are some farms around. Maybe, he said, maybe if you're over the border where you're in a rural area, we could get you some kind of an agricultural grant because you're manufacturing in more of a agricultural low-income area or something. And that was a big stretch.
Right.
So I don't know. I've asked everybody that I am supposed to be asking.
Well, I'm surprised about the SBA based on what I know, but obviously I don't know everything. What we should do is let's take your card, if you'll give your card to Greg, and we can maybe get some more better understanding, because obviously we do want to encourage small businesses and we do want to encourage entrepreneurs in their garages and help them get from their garages to hiring lots of folk. And if we
By the way, so I mean we're going to do about $4 million in sales this year, and we're going to pay over $200,000 in taxes. So it is a success
Right.
story. We have added jobs. We have done it. I don't need the help now necessarily, but how do you start to help a new guy?
Right. Well, that's what would be helpful to understand, which is where are the holes? Where did we not have the programs, and what kind of programs could we have had, or how do we change existing programs? Because sometimes we can change existing programs, and as I said, what I do know about the SBA would lead me to think that there's some opportunity there, but clearly your experience was there wasn't, and we should figure that out and see if we can help the SBA think a little bit differently about this going forward. But congratulations on your success.
I'm Michael Shore. I'm the president of Michael Shore. I'm the president of of FLS Energy. We're a solar energy generation company, and we own the solar energy systems, solar thermal systems on the roofs of companies, and then sell the BTUs, sell the hot water to the clients, like a hotel or a military base or hospital. And a lot of the attention on solar energy and renewable energy seems to focus on solar PV. And I get nervous that that as legislation works its way through the Senate or through Congress, that solar hot water, which is highly cost effective, we're able to charge our clients significantly less than what they would pay for natural gas or electricity for heating their hot water. So I just want to make sure that solar hot water isn't overlooked just because it doesn't have the sex appeal that solar electric technology has.
Do you know if either the Bingaman bill or Waxman-Markey did the right thing, didn't do the right thing? Do you know?
I believe that solar hot water was added later. There was an amendment, and
Okay.
I'm sure somebody in here knows better than I do. There was an amendment, not long before it passed, so it was almost an afterthought. And
There were a lot of amendments, in fact, which is it's a good thing in the process. It's how things get better.
Sure, but I just want to keep this issue top
Okay.
of mind just because it
Thank
is
you.
so cost effective.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know how much more time I have. One more.
Hi, Jeffrey Hollander. I run a company called Seventh Generation. We sell very mundane products like bathroom tissue and laundry
Yep.
detergent. And we're
But you sell a lot of it.
we do. In spite of the lack of economic incentives to help us, but our business did grow 51% last year.
Wow.
And so this legislation, which will change the playing field because those products that are more carbon intensive will become somewhat more expensive, and consumers will be helped to make the right decision. My question for you is, there is a lot of legacy programs in the government, and recently the calculation was that the government spent about $1 billion helping the virgin timber industry build roads to cut down trees, which artificially makes products like recycled tissue more expensive because they're not competing on a level playing field. What's happening with looking back to some of those legacy programs to bring them into line with the administration's current philosophy?
So each of the cabinet departments and agencies, and Secretary Chu has just joined us, do undertake these look backs. They go back through all the regulatory programs that are in place and determine whether or not they should maintain them. What's complicated about this is the only way you can get rid of an existing rule or requirement of the government is with a new rule. So you have to undo it through a process, and that means it just takes time. One of the things that Secretary Vilsack has been looking at, and there's been some court cases in the last couple of weeks, and they're in slightly different places, is the roadless rule that was put in place by President Clinton, and then the Bush administration sought to amend, and I think we're trying to return to something that's more appropriate in terms of environmental protection, which I think would have an impact on some of the issues that you're raising. But there are these programs that allow the agencies to go back and review rules. I just want to be clear that it is a time-consuming process, and at the same time, all of our wonderful cabinet secretaries are eager to get on with new programs like the things that Steve Chu is doing on energy efficiency, which have just been amazing, a program that had really not been tended to for a considerable period of time. And now I think you've set like 5 standards since you've been in office. Is that So we're sort of trying to move here on 2 tracks. Let me turn it over to Steve Chu. And again, let me just thank everybody for what you're doing. Please send us those stories, and the more details, the better off we are, the better able we are to use them. Let us know where the green jobs are being created and how they're being created and why. Thank you all very, very much.
Wonderful. Well, now we're going to get the chance to hear from a couple of business leaders who have come along with you all to help let us hear their stories about how this is starting to impact some of their businesses. So Wayne Leonard, the CEO of Entergy, is going to start us off.
Morning. We are a broad base of business across America. We represent some 37 states. We touch all aspects of the economy. And we have come together here this morning, unified in one particular request. And that is that we pass comprehensive climate change and energy policy legislation this year. We are prepared as business to invest, to innovate, to transform the energy sector of this country and of the world. The way we source energy, the way we deliver energy, the way we use energy. We want to get America back in the business of exporting technology instead of dollars. In order to do that, we need comprehensive legislation. We didn't know what the rules are going to be with regard to energy and with regard to climate, and particularly with regard to what the price of carbon is going to be in the United States if we're to move around the world and export technology to other countries, and we need legislation in order to do that. I'm the CEO of Entergy. We have nuclear plants around the country. We also serve 2.5 million customers in the Mid-South and the Gulf South portion of the country, some of the poorest people in the country. People that have been through Katrina, Gustav, Ike, Rita, you name it, they've been through it. Nobody should ever have to suffer through a Katrina. Last night, I was talking to Secretary Salazar, and he asked me what happens to New Orleans when sea level rise is not an inch from thermal expansion, but meters due to land ice melt in West Antarctica and Greenland. And I said, well, we have a pretty good idea what's going to happen, but we do have some protections because we're working on New Orleans. What we haven't given enough thought to is what happens to everybody else. What happens to all the coastal cities? What happens to the east coast of the U.S. with the slightly tilt of the planet on its axis as we melt those ice caps? There's no protection for them. And we're not talking about hurricanes anymore. We're talking about potentially tsunami type of events like we've seen in Asia, like we've seen most recently in American Samoa. A completely different set of events than what we're used to. Some people say we can't do this because of the cost. As business, we all look at it in terms of it's an investment. In this case, it's an investment that by all facts, figures, analysis pays back many times over. It pays back with reduced adaptation costs in the future, reduced repair and damage from these type of events, and growth in the economy through transferring technology around the world and creating jobs at home. Some people say we can't do this because there's some things that are uncertain, but in large part that is precisely the reason we need to act, because of the uncertainty, not necessarily because of the things that we do know. We do know a lot, as you all know. We are virtually certain climate change is occurring, and it's occurring because of man's activities. We're virtually certain the probability distribution curve is all bad. There is no good things that's going to come of this. What is uncertain is exactly which one of those things will occur and on what type of time frame. In that probability distribution curve is about a 50% probability that about half of all species will become extinct or be subject to extinction over this period of time. What we will never know on an ex-ante basis is whether or not man will be one of those casualties or not. We condemn Wall Street for taking risks with our economy, risks that all of you are working very hard to reverse. But at the same time, we're taking exactly the same type of risk with no upside whatsoever with regard to our climate, failing to practice even the most basic risk management techniques in terms of climate change reduction. We talk a lot in this issue about us and we. And as all of you know, this is not about us. This is about our children. This is about our children's children. When our children are born, we know at that moment in time that there isn't anything in the world we wouldn't do for them. And as they grow, we know for certain that we give up our lives for our children. For some reason, we won't do this. We're cheating them out of their future, and we're doing it with our eyes wide open. And that's exactly how history will judge us if we don't pass comprehensive energy and climate change reform now. Thank you.
Wow. Good morning, everyone. and thank you all for being here, and thank you, Secretary Chu, for allowing me to step up. And I guess I found out this morning that I'm a vignette. So we'll tell our story, and certainly proud to be here with leaders of one of our largest utilities. Certainly speaks to the importance of today's discussion. A123 is a great example, I think, a great example of American innovation. We have our roots at an American university at MIT and technology that we license from there. We got some of our first funding in the form of an SBIR, small business grant from the Department of Energy, and we work cooperatively with the DOE over the course of the last 8 years. And we've been driven by an American entrepreneurial spirit that has propelled us forward to where we are today. And where we are right now is that we're at the forefront of a new advanced battery industry. And it's all based on new advanced lithium-ion technology that's allowing us to have different ways to store energy, actually to produce energy in some ways, and to use energy. We're allowing ourselves to have cleaner cars with less dependence on fossil fuel, and to help performance of the grid so it can sustain and work cooperatively with new forms of renewable energy generation like wind and solar, helping with the variability that's natural to those energy sources. We're not alone right now in this endeavor to participate in this significant market opportunity. We have a number of large international competitors that have been very, very well financed and supported by their local governments. And I think as we look at this, it's not game over, it's game on. And we certainly hope to compete on a global basis as well as help build jobs in America. It's not about politics, it's about people and jobs. And it's an opportunity to grow those jobs. And we have new facilities in Michigan that are adding jobs today, and we believe we will add thousands of jobs in what is a really great example of cooperation between private and public sector. These jobs are going to bring, we believe, financial stability, but they're clean energy jobs. And for our people who have been in technology all their lives, there's something special about being able to not only do something different and game-changing, but do something that's going to make this a better place to live in a cleaner environment. Our priority right now at A123 is to ramp up production to meet global demand. The U.S.-based production is at the core of that. We're going to grow our research and development facilities in Michigan and Massachusetts and elsewhere as part of a long-term plan that we've got to build out our supply chain. But as anybody here that runs a business, and many of you do, knows that if you're going to make effective long-term plans, you've got to understand the rules of the game. And it's important that we have a national energy policy that adds clarity and definition to the longer-term prospects of this clean economy and new energy activity. So I urge the Congress today to pass a comprehensive energy legislation that removes the guesswork for business and the uncertainty that represents an impediment to our long-term growth in this particular area, and will help us remove our dependence on fossil fuels overall. And by doing so, I think we're going to open up the playing field for American initiative, American innovation, and American businesses that will drive what we will consider not only possible but sustainable energy activity in North America in the future. Thank you very much.
That's right. My name's John Doerr, and I have the privilege of introducing to you Secretary Chu. There's two really great Americans who've won Nobel Prizes who have had a powerful impact on me and all of us and on this conversation. One is Vice President Al Gore. He brought this issue front and center around the world. But the second, who is actually moving on this issue, is Dr. Steven Chu. When Steven Chu was announced as the next Secretary of Energy by the President, I thought to myself, this is brilliant. This is the best appointment that we possibly could have made. Steve is smart. Steve is funny. Steve is energetic. I wanted a meeting with Steve on a couple days' notice. He was out in California. I really couldn't get it, except he was going to ride for 25 miles the Portola Loop around Stanford campus. So I got on my bike. I'm a 25-mile-a-week, 50-mile-a-week rider, and this man smoked me. It's a great privilege to introduce to you Secretary Chu with one of the most exciting jobs leading our nation, making this new clean energy future happen. Steve.
Hey, thank you, John. Let's see how we're going to do this. I hope this works. Anyway, I hope you can read all this. Essentially, what we really need in the coming decades is a new industrial revolution. We need it for increased competitiveness globally. We need it to decrease our dependency on foreign oil, and we need it because of climate change. And so, with a comprehensive climate and energy bill, we can set the country in the right direction for this, so we can lead in this new industrial revolution. This, I think you all know about. This is our production and consumption of oil. The production peaked somewhere around 1970 in the United States, and it's going down, whereas our dependency has increased now up to about 60%, and that's hundreds of billions of dollars a year being shipped abroad. The impact of climate change globally is, with each successive year, becoming better understood. I commend you to read this report. It's a summary of a number of reports, including the IPCC reports. But it's a summary of what might happen in the United States. And let me just give you an example of that. If you take as a base period of time, 1961 to 1971, this is the upper left-hand corner of the slide. It tells you what the temperature was like in the United States. For example, in the city of Chicago, maybe a few days above 90 degrees. In the business as usual, the upper higher emission scenario by the end of the century, we're looking at a Chicago which might have 75 to 90 days above 90 degrees Fahrenheit. And in St. Louis, you're looking for 1/3 of the year above 90. Okay? Even in the lower emissions scenario, you're seeing a significant number of days on the scale of a month and a half above 90 degrees. This has a profound impact not only on the number of heat-related deaths that would occur in metropolitan areas, but a profound effect on agriculture. It's also predicted that there will be less rain in the summer, more rain in the winter and early spring in the Midwest, more evaporation in the summer, less rain in the summer. And so much of the middle part of the United States, or grain belt, is not irrigated. And so that will be a tremendous stress on our agricultural productivity. So those are some of the things that we're looking towards if we don't get moving. Another thing is, how are we doing on this race for the new industrial revolution? Well, so far not so good. This is worldwide shipments of solar photovoltaics. The U.S. market share, which peaked at around 45%, is now declining and is less than 10% today. This is not only true of photovoltaics. If you look at many of the other sectors, automobile efficiency, the batteries, right now, we're hoping to, companies like AB123 and others will actually come back, but right now, if you buy, for example, a hybrid car, 99% of those batteries are made in Asia. Electricity transmission, Westinghouse and Edison were the first to bring electricity transmission distribution into the world. We are behind in that, power electronics, nuclear power, and so on. Every technology we're beginning to slip by on. Now, China. I went to China about 2 months ago, and I had the privilege of going to China 2 years before that, and both times I talked to the Premier of China. One, it had to do with the release of a report, How Does the World Transition to Sustainable Energy, that I had the privilege of co-chairing. And this last time as Secretary of Energy, when I talked to Wen Jiabao the first time, 2.5 years ago, he talked about how they're going to improve in energy intensity and things of that nature. This time it was different. This time, of course, energy intensity. First, they were making great strides, but he said the climate, if we continue on a business as usual trajectory, the effects of climate change would be devastating on China and the rest of the world, that our use of energy and our growth in energy is unsustainable, our use of coal is unsustainable, and we have to diversify. And we have to do all the things. And, oh, by the way, this is going to be a basis for economic prosperity in China, not only for exports, but also for internal consumption. And China has replaced the United States as a leader in high technology manufacturing. There's no reason why we should be allowing this to happen. their goal, very aggressive goals, 10% of electricity from renewables by 2010 and 15% by 2020. Enormous investments. The State Grid, which is a public company, is an amalgamation of a lot of local companies in distribution and power generation. They're going to be investing $88 billion by 2020 in ultra-high voltage transmission lines. They've got a 1 million volt AC transmission line. They're installing a 800 plus or minus 800 kilovolt DC transmission line that could port energy 1,900 kilometers from the west, where their renewable energy is, to the east, where their population centers are, with a 5 to 7%, they're expecting a 5 to 7% loss in energy over that distance. So they're leading the world in this stuff, and they're making these tremendous investments. Just wind and solar is going to be a $3.5 trillion market going into the future. And so this is something which we should be aiming at. China is certainly aiming at that. They have a memorandum of understanding for an American company to build a plant in China for 2 gigawatts of solar for utility scale generation. So these are some of the things, and if we don't realize, first, there's a climate imperative, but there's also an incredible economic opportunity that we might pass by if we don't send the right signals. Now, the Department of Energy has been given a lot of responsibility in stimulating the economy also, but most of the money that we've been given to stimulate the economy is being focused on rebuilding a much more efficient infrastructure in the United States and also to spur on new businesses. And so we've created a financial institutional partnership program. We think that $4 billion of Recovery Act money would support $32 billion in loan guarantees and create $40 to $50 billion in project investments. So this is a highly leveraged money. So the federal dollars are going to be bringing private sector money that's been sitting on the sidelines back. And part of this is the first tranche is going to be for conventional renewable energy projects. And we've seen this in the past. We're streamlining the process. If the bank has a lot of skin in the game, it's got to have at least 20%. And it's going to be more than that. It's another 16. And they do due diligence on those loans. We're saying that's good enough for us. So we don't have to add another couple of months to years of due diligence. And so, again, very quick. In the 1603 money, where we give the companies, instead of stringing out the tax credits of renewable energy over 8, 10 years, as soon as they turned on the wind generation or the solar farms, we give them the money up front. Many of those companies took the money and reinvested it, again, highly leveraged. And in 2 instances, I heard of 2 companies that immediately reinvested $2.5 billion, private sector money, back into this stuff. So, and what's really nice about that is they got the money 21 days after the application. The money was wired to their checking account. So we're trying to go a little bit faster than I can ride a bike. One of the things that we're pushing very hard on, I'm sure all of you know about, is that you need, in order to get renewable energy and energy efficiency and all these other things, you can't have on-again, off-again fiscal policies. And so we're pushing very hard so that you get a 10-year or 20-year outlook on what the rules are. And this is a good example. If you have on-again, off-again production tax credits for wind generation, for example, you see the same behavior. And as soon as you stop fooling around with this on-again, off-again stuff, then you see real growth. And it was that long-term steady investment that actually allowed Europe to overtake us in wind generation technology. And so, again, it's things like that that are very important. But the most important thing, you know, there's lots of carrots that we're contemplating in the energy bill, but you also need a very long-term signal. And the long-term signal is that you are going to put a cap on carbon and a long-term decline in the carbon emission in the United States. And it's that long-term signal that will begin to drive this most serious investments of power companies that we're going to have to sit there and say, okay, this is now for real. If you give people carrots, they will grab at the carrots and munch on them happily. But unless you have a long-term signal that says, okay, even allocations will run out, and then you see that, and it's going to be the carbon cap will be marching down, and that will drive the investments. So, say in a new power plant, it's a $1 to $2 billion investment in a coal plant. That will create some serious thinking, because that plant will be up for 50, 60 years. And whether it's going to, and that will create a big incentive to get really serious about capturing the carbon in these power plants, as an example. So this is very, very important. And it's the most vulnerable part of the comprehensive energy and climate bill, because it's the part that really means something in the long term, and that's that long-term signal. And that's why it's the one that's so vulnerable. The rest are just carrots that people can happily grab at. There are many examples of clean energy transition. In fact, this is taken when President Obama was president-elect, and there's this bolt company in Ohio that makes these bolts. You need 1,500 of these bolts in a typical large wind turbine. I've got one sitting on my desk. It's 10 pounds. It's this mother bolt. It's using the steel production capabilities in Ohio, but it's a high-tech steel, very, very high-strength steel that is now incorporated in all the wind manufacturing, turbine manufacturers in the U.S., and foreign manufacturers are adapting this. So again, we're bringing back manufacturing back in the United States. This is one small example, but we've got to do this in all the sectors where we've lost leadership. Finally, let me just mention energy efficiency. There was a recent McKinsey report. They were a bit optimistic on what energy, I think a bit optimistic, but I would like to, well, I should preface this by saying, if you look at the EIA reports, for example, of what we could achieve by energy efficiency, it's more pessimistic than the McKinsey report. But I would love to see the McKinsey report come true. And we have to take concerted, aggressive, sustained effort in order so that we can achieve the energy efficiencies and the money savings. McKinsey was talking about a 26% reduction in the primary consumption of energy in the United States, just in energy efficiency alone. And when we stop wasting money on energy, that first, the rebuilding of American infrastructure, reinvestment of homes, commercial buildings, as well as industry, you're not only saving money, but you're creating jobs, and then that money saved gets pumped right back in the economy. And so we're thinking very hard about specific programs in order to overcome the information hurdles, the financial hurdles, to get these energy efficiencies, in particular in residential homes where there's a, well, let's just say that not many people actually want to take the time or have the information and to find out what you can really do in your home to save 10, 20, and even 30% energy, and how do you do it most effectively. So we're going to be piloting a number of programs like that. Let's finally end up with the cost. There's several estimates out there. There are other estimates besides these. There are estimates that instead of about less than $200 a year, let's say 44 cents a day, there are some estimates that go much higher. I personally think that the CBO estimate seems to be reasonable. If we push on energy efficiency, it would be less than this if we push really hard on it and get effective programs. But let's go back to the end result. This is how much it will cost, let's say, an average family of four electricity bill. Okay. The cost of not doing something is that we will lose an opportunity to lead in this next industrial revolution. We will leave a world much worse off for our children and our grandchildren. So there's huge opportunity costs if we don't do this, and so we have to ask ourselves, is 48 cents a day worth it? And you should convince some of the senators who are on the fence that it is worth it. Okay, so with that, I thank you. Okay, so it's now my pleasure to introduce Secretary Locke, who will hopefully carry on the same message from the Commerce side.
Good to see you. Well, thank you very much, Secretary Chu. And it's I always find these meetings with Secretary Chu very, very informative, and I'm always learning something at each of his presentations. Secretary Chu and I had the opportunity to go to China just a few months ago, and a lot of his slides and his talks and the information he gave you was as a result of that trip. But it really was an eye-opener. It truly is an eye-opener. And I'd like to come back to a little bit about the challenges posed by China and the opportunities that we have here in America in terms of renewable energy and combating climate change, and obviously the legislation that's being considered on the Hill and your role in that. But we need the support of the business community. We need the support of the business community because, quite frankly, as Secretary Chu indicated, there are estimates of the high cost of this energy legislation. But the cost of not acting is even higher. And this energy legislation isn't just important for our environment, it's crucial for our economic competitiveness. In the next several years, some entrepreneur, some innovator is going to come up with a revolutionary way to create new lightweight batteries for automobiles, or a safe, affordable way to capture carbon from our coal plants, or a cheap and effective way to store power from the sun or even the wind. And these discoveries are going to fundamentally change the way we use energy. And President Obama wants to make sure that the brains behind these innovations live, work, and create the jobs here in America. When you really look at it, so much of the technology that is now being used worldwide, whether in Germany, India, or even China, that technology was actually created here, invented here in the United States. The United States really invented photovoltaic cells, but it was really Japan that commercialized its application for businesses and homes, and now it's China that's leading the manufacturing of those photovoltaic cells. We have the smarts here, and the question is, will we translate those smarts into good-paying jobs here to supply the needs not just of America, but all around the world? I know there's a lot of skepticism whenever there's talk about the promise of clean energy, and we've been hearing about the promise of clean energy for decades. And part of the reason is that over the last several decades, there have been hikes in oil prices, and then they come crashing down. And during the high points, businesses funneled cash into things like wind farms and solar factories, only to see those investments wiped out once the price of oil came tumbling down. This time it has to be different. It has to be different. And yes, for a good 100 years or so, American businesses enjoyed the fastest growth we've ever seen in the history of humankind. And we can point to countless innovations that help build today's modern 21st century economy and a lifestyle. Automobiles, telephones, cell phones, televisions, space exploration, and finally the internet. All those were brought about with two constants. Fossil fuels were cheap, and the externalities of using those carbon emissions were of absolutely no concern. Well, those days are over. We can't continue to count on cheap energy. And we know that the costs associated with the use of fossil fuels are astronomically high. The consequences for our environment and our economy will be devastating if we don't curb our carbon output. Now, yeah, maybe companies can continue for a couple more years using energy like they did, and they may enjoy a little bit more uninterrupted growth. But when the seas start rising, when floods increase, when droughts start spreading and lasting longer, you better believe that it's going to be bad for business, and it's going to have huge economic consequences for every single business, every single family, not just here in America, but all around the world. So our companies are going to have to adapt to these new realities of the 21st century. And that means starting to be more efficient with the use of energy as well as using cleaner fuels. Now, when legislation calling for radical change in terms of curbing pollution was discussed decades ago, talking about, for instance, acid rain, the business community and others said this was going to cost too much. It was going to cost perhaps $50 billion a year and lead to astronomically high electricity prices. The truth of the matter is it costs less than 5%. And after adjusted for inflation, electricity prices have actually gone down over the last several years. So we know that if we give the right incentives, if there are rules of the game and that are predictable, the business community will respond and respond accordingly. That's really the message that I want to give to you right now. It's absolutely important that we pass this energy legislation because there's so many businesses and investors and entrepreneurs and innovators out there waiting to see and to learn what the rules of the road are, what the rules of the game will be before they make those investments. And the longer we wait, the more China invests into clean energy technology, the more China puts money into and developing industries in alternative energy, renewable energy, and the farther China will be ahead of us. China is, as Secretary Chu indicated, spending some almost $12 million an hour on clean energy, renewable energy, alternative energy. That comes out to almost $9 billion a month. $9 billion a month. And they're developing these industries not just to meet their own energy needs and to address the climate change challenges that they face. They're developing these industries to address the needs of the entire world. And if we don't get our act together, we're going to be so far behind that it's going to be very, very difficult for us to capture the opportunities for companies, for good-paying jobs here in America. There's absolutely no reason why, if we innovate and if we are creating these great ideas and the new technologies, there's absolutely no reason why the jobs associated with that technology in supplying our energy needs as well as the world's needs cannot be here in America. That's our goal. And so we need your support. Now, many of you have already indicated that support. Many of you and many of the companies that you represent, the organizations that you represent, nonprofit organizations and academia, many of you have noted that the longer we wait, the farther behind we will be. Many of you have called on the Congress to pass this legislation just to provide the certainty by which businesses and investors and innovators will know how to move forward. We need you to spread that message to the members of the Hill, to the U.S. Senate. They're taking up the legislation soon. It barely passed the House of Representatives. We need a strong bit of legislation because we know it's important for our environment, but most of all, it's really important for our economic competitiveness. Our economic competitiveness, the source of jobs, not just for today's workers, but for our children and our grandchildren. So we thank you very much for attending, and Secretary Chu and I are open for any questions or comments that you might have, but really, we cannot let this opportunity of clean energy pass us by for the sake of the earth, for the sake of the environment, for the sake of our children, for the economic competitiveness of America. We need your help. Thank you very much.
So we're going to take some questions, but before, I just want to make a very brief announcement. Please, when we call on you, state your name, what organization you're from, and then your question. And so, you want to point? Okay. Yes.
Please stand up and wait for a microphone.
Yes.
Hi, Larry Lieberman with Natural Power Concepts. We are a Hawaii-based renewable energy innovation center, designing and prototyping new types of wind and ocean energy devices. I'm wondering if you have plans to address the energy sector within the patent office and in some way expedite or streamline the process for getting innovation patented.
Are you tapping our telephone lines? Actually, that is under consideration right now. That is under active consideration right now, and we hope perhaps to have an announcement soon. But let me just say also that in terms of the Patent Office, we are in the midst of a radical reform and overhaul of the Patent Office. Right now it takes almost more than 2.5 years before the Patent Office will even look at your application for a patent. Almost more than 2 years before they even pick up the file. And almost 3 years before they make a decision whether to grant or deny the patent application. I think that's scandalous. And so we have directions and working with the employees and process improvement. We're just going to blow up the whole process. We want to get it down to less than a year.
Hi, my name is Greg Fisher. and I have a company by the name of Fisher Coachworks. We produce mass transit buses for city. We have an electric, plug-in electric bus. I wanted to thank, first of all, we have several prospects with Clean Cities, the Tigger and Tiger program, and our order book is looking great. And with technology from A123, who are putting battery packs in our vehicles, hopefully getting lighter, cheaper, more energy density, we'll have a very sustainable vehicle. But my conclusion, as I learned last night, is the rules don't apply with respect to the EPA, and I know that's not who I'm talking to here. But one of the things that, for this new economy that we need to make sure of is that the rules do apply. Because in our situation, think of a bus with a generator in it. I can go to Home Depot and get a generator to run my ancillary loads like air conditioning and so on, yet I can't use that same generator to create electricity to turn the wheels. I have to go out and use an 8-liter diesel engine like in buses today, because that's the way the EPA, so I guess my comment is we need to make sure that the rules apply to the green economy, because right now they're hampering us from bringing product to the market efficiently. Thank you.
All right. Okay, there's something back there.
My name is Pete Strom. I'm with Powerhouse Integrated Conservation Systems, and the slide you were showing about building efficiency and that there's so much there that we can do in conservation. That's essentially what we do with our business. The problem is the incentives for a lot of that less sexy stuff on building envelopes and so on just aren't there the way that they are for solar or solar thermal or any of the others. And what types of things have you talked about? I mean, we have a company that's very scalable. We can do this really quickly. The people are trained to do it, but the incentives need to be there for some of the stuff that has been around forever that just makes those buildings more efficient.
So let me talk about some of the things we're thinking of. Having had to sell my home in California when I came here, and buying a new home, there's a structural engineer. We think we'd like it, banks that are thinking of making loans to people buy homes to, just as they ask for a termite report, why shouldn't they ask for last year's energy bills, utility bills? Transaction costs minimal, it's much less than a termite inspection, and also when you have a structural inspection, make that an energy audit inspection as well. So what does that do? It motivates the current homeowner to make energy investments and increase the resale value. It creates a much more knowledgeable buyer. And then what you would like to do is you could add on, the few $1,000s to $10,000 or whatever it takes onto the mortgage. So when you sell your home, so you make those, you're most motivated actually to make the investments as you're moving in. And so the transaction costs would be minimal, the amount of tax dollars would be minimal, there's no tax money involved, but it aligns incentives in the right direction. The other thing we're looking at is if you want to rebuild the infrastructure in a more rapid pace, think about this, you get an energy audit, you have to bring someone in, you don't know who's reliable, then you don't know which contractor is reliable, you get 3 estimates and all this, it's a lot of hassle. What you'd really like is to certify and get some bigger stakeholders to say, we will do an entire block or at least half the block or a third of the block, okay, and so make it a social event. Now you have the energy audit and the blower door test door after door after door, if you do half of those. And then you have the machine that blows in insulation, again, door after door. So you can easily see the costs of the retrofits coming way down. If we can get these people certified, then there's more confidence that they're going to do a good job. And so there are things, and then you socialize it. And each of the homes on that block who've done this, they put a nice Super Saver sticker on their door of some kind. So there are many, many things like that that we think can align incentives without the federal dollar just paying for something. And so we're looking at a number of programs like that. I'm talking to Sean Donovan about the FHA. We start with that and ask for an energy audit. Get as a routine the banks to do things like that. The most important thing, though, and we're going to be piloting. We're going to have $400 million in Department of Energy to actually pilot this retrofit on a block-by-block basis to see if it really can bring down costs by a factor of 2 or 3, and make it the socially good thing to do and acceptable thing to do. And if it works, then we would like to get that in many communities, or all communities around the country.
Let me just. I'd like to add a little bit to a slightly different take and another strategy by which we can help drive efficiency. And really, we need to also focus on energy efficiency in addition to renewable energy and reducing carbon emissions from the new forms of energy to meet a growing demand and growing population. I mean, the world is rapidly developing. I mean, there's so many countries where 50–60% of the people live in the rural areas, and most of those people have absolutely no refrigeration. So as their economies develop, as they strive and push for a higher standard of living, just even having refrigeration, will require huge amounts of electricity. So the challenge is not just to make sure that as we produce more electricity, it's without using carbon or emitting carbon, but also trying to reduce our carbon footprint right now through energy efficiency. And what Secretary Chu is talking about is a very important strategy. Another one is to create incentives right now for people, and for instance, allowing utilities to decouple their rates. Instead of being rewarded for building more power plants, why not reward utilities for actually reducing the amount of electricity that is consumed, because so much of that electricity now is produced using large amounts of carbon, producing a lot of large amounts of carbon into the atmosphere. Another thing, time of use metering. We need to make sure that people have incentives to really conserve electricity and take advantage of the peaks and valleys of electricity demand and loads, and reward people for using, for instance, they're turning on their electric clothes dryers maybe at 2 o'clock in the morning when the price of electricity is cheaper. Getting people into that conscious habit of monitoring their electricity use. And then with the advent of a smart grid and electric cars, people being able to sell electricity back into the grid. That depends on a smart grid, and that's why we also need to have the certainty of the legislation. And of course, the smart grid the standards for a smart grid are being developed by our Department of Commerce National Institute for Standards and Technology. And Secretary Chu challenged us to really go out like gangbusters and not allow the federal bureaucracy to take years and years and years. And actually, we hope to have virtually all of the standards devised through a consensus-based process, working with stakeholders from utilities to industry and technology people. We actually hope to have most of those standards finalized by the middle of next year, of 2010. But, time of use metering, that's going to require, and decoupling, that's going to require action by the states at each of the public utility commissions. Very, very controversial, but it's a necessary ingredient in terms of our national strategy to reduce the use of electricity, to become more energy efficient, and to reduce our carbon footprint.
Wait for the mic. Thank you. Secretary Chu, Secretary Locke. My name is Peter Brehm. I'm with Infinia from Governor Locke's home state in Tri-Cities, Washington. Had the opportunity to be on the Senator Murray's Green Jobs panel with you last week, Mr. Secretary. To add on those comments I made last week, I would encourage the departments and the federal government to concentrate more on investments on technologies developed and promoted in the U.S. As I complimented you last week, in the solar industry right now, the U.S. still co-leads, at least, in concentrated solar power. We're a solar dish Stirling manufacturer, make Stirling engines for concentrated solar power. Yet, and on your leadership, that budget has grown significantly relative to the photovoltaic budget, but we're still only maybe 20 or 25% of the PV budget. And you made an interesting observation how China is about to spend billions literally on a transmission grid, doing high voltage DC, high voltage AC from the west to east, which is arguably the same thing we need to do in the U.S., moving power from the Midwest and the wind and the solar power in the Southwest. U.S. still co-leads the world in high temperature superconducting. And you mentioned that if you do high voltage DC or high voltage AC, you're losing 5 to 7%. If you do high temperature superconducting, you may only lose 2 to 3%. And then I would note that the high temperature superconductor budget has actually been cut in the recent years. And I would encourage as much investment, more targeted incentives for U.S. industries that still co-lead. I'm interested in your comments on that.
Well, with regard to the high temperature superconducting budget, I think there isn't a company, I'm watching them very closely. I don't really know, you know, they claim in their, actually a couple of days ago I read one of their brochures, I hope they succeed, but I don't really know how far away they are. They say this is going to be cost effective, and there's a little footnote, and you look at the footnote and it says, when the technology is mature. So right now it's being piloted in very high congestion areas where there's simply no room and there's a very short throw. What we're trying to do, we're making difficult choices, and what we're trying to do is trying to invest in things which can be deployable in 5-10 years. That, you know, we're like energy efficiency. These are things that we know how to do. Meanwhile, we're trying to also place bets on, you know, what's going to happen 10 years, 20 years, 30 years down the road. With high temperature superconducting, it's part of it's manufacturing, but a lot of it is, you know, we want to invest in even better materials that can have higher critical fields and all those things. And so that was one of those tough calls. You know, we're trying to make the best decisions possible, and I guarantee you one thing, and the best way to do that is to improve the way we review proposals. You know, I've been looking at the way the Department of Energy review proposals in the past, and it's been pretty mixed. And so even for the ARPA-E program, huge change. Wrote a letter to all the presidents of the major research universities and the deans and professional societies and said, give us names of your best people, not your people who have nothing else to do, your best people. So they gave us names, and then we actually, for ARPA-E and a few other key things, we actually approached them, and a surprising number of them volunteered because we just said, look, it's your patriotic duty. And and it's a lot of it, if, for example, if you're in university and you're reviewing this is pro bono, you could be spending a week of your time, integrated time, reviewing a bunch of proposals. But in order to get the best reviewers, the most competent ones, the ones who actually know what's on the cutting edge, what was disturbing to me is we were funding things I saw when I was lab director and even my first months here that were not on the cutting edge, and sometimes proposals were being rejected because they would say, well, manufacturing can't do this. And then I said, no, manufacturing, U.S. manufacturing can't. We have toured a cylinder plant, and a lot of people from Applied Materials also. Great. The technology in manufacturing, precision technology is awesome in the United States. And so one proposal was turned down because they said, you can't, you know, on square meters and mass production put in 10,000 electrical connections. I said, wait a minute, there's a $2 billion investment that says we can. And I visited the factory, and they're cranking them out. So that's why the rubber really hits the road in the quality of the reviewers. Okay? And I, unfortunately, can't review all the proposals myself. Yes?
A race.
Hi, I'm Lauren Bigelow. I'm with New Energy Finance. And you were talking earlier about your personal experience in moving to the East Coast. A couple weeks ago, I was with a number of multifamily housing units, people that own them, and that's a large percentage of our population. And a Stanford study just came out and was talking about energy efficiency between homeowners and renters. There's a significant gap, and the challenge when I was talking to these REITs was that there's no incentives right now for multifamily housing, and they're really interested in bringing in energy efficiency technologies and in putting solar on their roofs. And they think it's a serious benefit to their renters, but there's no tax incentives in place. Is there anything in this administration that they're looking at that?
It's not in multifamily dwellings. It's actually, you know, landlords of apartments. And you've got what the economists call this principal aging problem. And so we're thinking about it. There's not programs like the other programs that I just mentioned, which we are trying to implement. And I'd be glad to have any suggestions from any of you out there to get over that principal agent problem. You know, of how do you make the energy improvements, and you know, and how do you actually factor that in to the rents, or the, you know, when. Well, anyway, you guys all know the principal agent problem. I saw a lot of heads nodding, so I'm not going to explain that. But I'd be glad to get any advice on how we can overcome that.
Jim Hurd, Green Science Exchange. The talk on innovation has been very good. Some people have been commenting that we need to strengthen the actions on innovation, that a lot of focus has been on stimulus, and that we need to push the 3 to 10 year time frame and get money and mainstream and get it talked about in USA Today and other places, that if we don't get the SBIR program reauthorized, if we don't get the new ATP TIP program authorized, if we, you know, the solar program, a lot of people feel we could put a lot more money there. You know Paul Alivasadas for many years, and we really need to spend some money to keep up with China and other leading countries. You know, the hybrid and electric auto industry in Jiading in China is amazing, and we need to really see if we can't. One last thing is I haven't heard anybody use the phrase Valley of Death. And that was a very important phrase for many years, and I'd love to see us, you know, focus on that after the stimulus focus is, you know, that could be a next step possibly.
Well, there's a couple of valleys of death, and it's certainly, we're quietly doing this in the Department of Energy. I mean, we fund a lot of basic research, it's mission-directed basic research, then there's a valley of death between that and the applied areas. There's a valley of death between some of the things that we fund in the applied areas and where it's really picked up in industry in a serious way. So we're very, very intent in breaking down the stovepipes. A lot of the new programs, the ARP-E program, the Energy Hub program is one where you also want to get the very best basic scientists. I mean, if you take our World War II experience as an example, you put some of the best basic scientists in with some engineers, and you develop radar or you develop a bomb in a way where you really want an end product very quickly and very focused attention on that. And actually, and again, because of the huge concern about climate and energy independence and all these other things, many scientists are willing to alter their career in a drastic way, like I did about 5 or 6 years ago, to work on this problem. And so you have that growing sense of urgency among the scientific core and the engineering core that can do this. And so we want to harness, again, that new patriotic spirit, if you will. It's now patriotic for the entire world to actually get. So that's the idea of the hubs. And the ARPA-E, again, is, you know, short fuse, but swing from the heels. Maybe we can get a few home runs. But we need a few home runs. So there's many, many things like that that we're piloting. ARPA is more than a pilot, though.
Let me just add that just last week, the Department of Commerce announced that we're creating an Office of Innovation and Entrepreneurship that will be reporting directly to me. And the purpose of this, and we're going to have a National Advisory Council of the most esteemed entrepreneurs, venture capitalists, and economists, and inventors out there. And the whole purpose is to really look at the entire federal framework and to really isolate those impediments to innovation, including the Valley of Death, but really to figure out what are the policies that the federal government and all the agencies should be focusing on to really move those creative ideas into commercialization. And so the President is very much committed to innovation, and so we're really proud to have launched this effort.
Folks, this is going to be our final question for the day.
My name is Dan Thompson. I have a company called the Building Doctors out of Los Angeles. We do building performance testing and energy efficient retrofitting, like you were talking about. I mean, I'm here mainly to talk about the REAP, which is the Retrofit for Energy and Environmental Performance, which is part of the ACES Act that's getting voted on. Just want to know, Secretary Chu, what happened with the retrofit ramp up? They just, I just wonder what success you had with that.
Well, we put a notice out for comment. We're working on the rules now, hopefully in the next couple of weeks. This is a roughly $400 million program that would be that block party sort of thing. So we're undergoing, so it would be focused, well, we're doing a couple of experiments. One would be very big organizations that would do some of the things, but we'd also want to see if it can be scaled down and to be effective on smaller operations. So again, it's you want to do retrofits on a more mass production sort of scale. It's exactly what I was talking about. You go in a block or several blocks and you sign up as many people as you can. Use all the social pressures you can to get people to sign up. You get the outfits so that the people have confidence that the work will be done properly with proper energy audits, so we're not going to waste money. My biggest fear, let me be very frank, is that the most cost-effective things might not be done, or there might be contractors that are either incompetent or crooks. This happened to me when I was in Stanford. We bought an old house, a 1908 house, and it was the ceiling was uninsulated, but there was huge, because it was such an old house, there was that much space, but it had to be blown in. I couldn't just go to the hardware store because there were boards on top. And so I got a couple bids, of course took the lowest bidder, but cleverly said I wanted R32. I put in a standard. And when the person came to blow in the insulation, I actually left work and bicycled back home and actually was going to help him with the insulation. And I found he was, the first part of the master bedroom, he was only blowing this much, not that much. So I helped him fill it up. This is a young kid out of high school who was doing this, and then after about 45 minutes, the owner calls up and says, "What are you doing? You're late for your next job." And then he found out that all the insulation was being used in the truck. Okay, he had no intention of filling it up and he said, "I'm going to have to charge you at least twice as much." I said, "Sorry, we have a contract. This is R32. That's how much it is." All sorts of screams and threats and everything, and he started screaming at this poor kid. And I said, "Don't scream at him, scream at me." But so that personal experience tells me that insulation is invisible, so you can't see it. So we've got, now there's technologies, infrared views and things like that, and so you can actually inspect a job. And so this is my big fear, is that it'll give energy efficiency a bad name and it won't save money if there are people like that out there, and there are. There's a technology where you can look at it and you can, without tearing down the walls, you can see whether they really did what they did. And so that's the good thing. And so we've got to make sure, and we certify those honest people to get the job done. And so that's one of the things that we're working on that as well.
And that's why I think also if you're working with the utilities, and if the utilities are helping organize a lot of these programs, whether it's through a decoupling program of utility rates or eventually taking advantage of the smart grid, if a lot of the utilities are driving it, they will have the list of contractors, and it's the utilities that perhaps can, or the governments, local governments, that can really verify the bona fideness of these operations. That's why, Steve, you've got to learn to do a lot of this work yourself.
I did. I just spit the foam on the hot water heater in my house last Sunday. It got the wrath of my wife because the dinner was late by an hour and a half, but never mind that. But
I was just going to say, just for your knowledge, just make sure that BPI, Building Performance Institute, it's the highest echelon in the training that there's in your legislation. If you can have that somewhere along the way, that they're all BPI certified, because we're held to a higher task than other folks. So.
Great.
But it's actually certifications like that that are very, very important, and so. But yes, I agree. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Sir. Good job.
Thank you. Certainly when the administration talks about green jobs, we don't mean exclusively cabinet secretaries, but I'm
cheap.
But I'm Gary Guzzi. I have the privilege of serving as the Deputy Director of the White House Council on Environmental Quality, and I also have the unenviable task of ending this discussion. I saw that there were probably another 30 hands that went up when it was question time for the secretaries, and really I think one of the things that's so extraordinary is the quality of the team that the President has assembled to be able to take on the climate and energy challenge, and it really is an extraordinary privilege to be able to serve with them. As some of you may know, I was actually in your seats only a few weeks ago. I served as the head of the climate risk and sustainability practice for the largest insurance brokerage and risk advisory company in the world, and then seeing the very promise of this area move to a early stage, innovative, entrepreneurial, smaller company that was providing the regulatory oversight, tracking, and registry systems for renewable energy credits and voluntary carbon credits. And I know the struggle that comes from the opportunistic approach about how long a burn rate do we actually have, where do we find our financing, how much do we invest in new technology and product development, how do we go to market in a successful way when the odds seem stacked against us, yet when we're convinced that the things that we're doing are both important for the economy, can create tremendous value for our company and consumers, and for the American public, and can actually be transformative in many ways. And I know as well the value that comes from insight into government thinking on emerging issues, and the sense of the sincerity of the commitment to transformation and change on these issues. And so that's why we're so pleased that you've taken time out of your busy schedules and all the many things that you're involved with and the challenges that you have, that you've come from over 30 states to join us here at the White House today, to be able to really focus in on where we are in the climate and energy discussion in Washington, and then to really highlight the important role that you all play in conveying where your business is, the challenges that you face, the promise that you all see, and the actual day-to-day experiences and the opportunity to really transform our economy, demonstrate leadership, create new, valuable American jobs, and really lead the world in innovation. We know, and the President has said repeatedly, that the jobs of tomorrow should not be beyond our borders, and yet we also see time and time again examples where, in fact, the innovation is occurring not at home. And yet it seems like the challenges are ones that are not rocket science in many ways. The importance of certainty and predictability in making investment decisions and understanding the regulatory landscape of the future, the importance of a comprehensive approach to legislation and government regulation, the importance of a comprehensive approach to fostering innovation, the importance of partnerships between the public sector and the private sector, the importance of technology forcing and providing that innovation. I think back to the Clean Air Act of 1970, when maybe 2 years before the Clean Air Act, there were something like fewer than 10 patents that were filed for sulfur dioxide reduction. And then 2 years after the enactment of the Clean Air Act, there were over 110 patents that were filed for that. And that really demonstrates the importance of setting the ground rules and then removing barriers to innovation and entrepreneurship. And I really hope it's clear to you the degree to which, from the start, this administration and this president has been about providing leadership on these issues and the insight that this isn't only about protecting the environment, it isn't only about building up the economy, it's that there's an essential linkage between the two, and that the very foundations of our economic progress are going to be tied to our ability to fundamentally transform our system of energy in this country and to promote new technology, to promote green jobs, to promote good American jobs, to promote innovation. At the Council on Environmental Quality, we look across the government at all of the activities that the federal government's involved in. And I was really pleased to be able to join President Obama just 2 days ago in signing a new executive order that is on federal leadership in environmental, energy, and economic performance. And if you haven't seen it, it really demonstrates that for the first time, the government will provide real leadership on greenhouse gas reductions in getting its own house in order and demonstrating that there are cost-effective approaches that are available, that this can be done and that it will be done. The executive order requires every federal agency to set a sustainability performance goal. It requires them to set a 2020 greenhouse gas emissions reduction target within 90 days of the President's signature, to increase their energy efficiency, to reduce fleet petroleum consumption, to support sustainable communities, to leverage federal purchasing power to promote environmentally responsible products and technology. So across the government, we're working to get our act together to demonstrate the possibilities as well. Likewise, thank you. Likewise, we recognize that there are appropriate and judicious authorities that, in the absence of federal legislation, it's incumbent upon the government to continue to use and carry out. And I think you've seen a number of activities underway at the Environmental Protection Agency, the Department of Interior, and throughout the government that demonstrate real leadership on these issues. And we continue to look throughout the government to find opportunities to promote innovation, to promote green jobs, to promote this transformation of our economy. But really, at the end of the day, it's the stories of people like you, it's the partnerships that are created between organizations like Ceres, and Mindy, thank you for your leadership on this, and many of your colleagues with the private sector and government. It's the successes that so many of you have had and your willingness to come here to Washington to share these stories with the American people and really demonstrate the significance and importance of the kind of change that we all believe and are working to achieve. And the President has made clear that we will work tirelessly until there's comprehensive energy and climate legislation on his desk, and you have our commitment to do that. We appreciate your assistance in doing that. We appreciate your efforts in telling your stories, and we thank you for joining us here today. Thank you.